You didn't have the wires anyway, did you?
Moshe, you're saying the router could do anything you want, yeah? Not that router, but yeah. What do you mean not that router? It's a 3K. So one set that router, where it's right.
What happened, Tony?
That's for the model. That's for the model now. No, I forgot to use it. They're not very effective. I use router board.
And the Shekalim's in town.
There's an article there on the shelf. I looked. What about is getting millions of hits? Because it's not just the shit, it's also. That's right. No, that's not going to give you.
Right, so we're having to see him every second day, right?
Good evening, Ian. Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Master, right.
And they use a smaller font to get it on one wow. It's like the Mishpat Talis, you know that? They give like 1,000 pages of adverts. So you start the Gemara, it's like 50
Need a pen.
Have you seen it? Make the font smaller to get it on the page.
It takes too long to get out more and it'll be finished.
I know. I went to a Sefer today to see which good fun have in Shekalim. So they said they'll get it in a couple of weeks. And I said a couple of weeks. Well, in 3 days, we're making a sim on the first Perek.
Well,
4 days.
The other place will be in 2 days' time.
You better tell Moshe now, we might get it on time.
Yeah, Moshe organised pizza.
Achtus, we say, Knish de Chado. That's right.
Very nice. You heard that part before?
No, that part, no. It's interesting, he brought up a few points we discussed, the Manishtano, the Ma, and the Chochman and Tzaddik. It was something else he brought up. Okay.
Because you discussed it with him.
Not this year. Not this year. Some of these things in the past, but
Really proud of you.
You've always got memories. So
yeah. Some of the things discussed. With tremendous across the Pirtak of the Shpochu. We're going to be starting Be'ez Hashem the new Masechta, Maseches Shekalim. Maseches Shekalim is very, very unique. It's Yerushalmi. We don't do much Yerushalmi. There's only a bit more in the end of Kodshim. Maybe asks the question that if we were to put Shekalim, where would we put it? Because we put it in Kodshim, because it's got to do completely of how to run the Beis HaMikdash, the Korbanos, buying the Korbanos, what do we do with the money? He even gives two main answers why Shekalim is in Moyed. Moyed, he says, is to do with things which come to the fixed time, and Shekalim was given at a fixed time. So Moyed, the fixed time, so Shekalim is bought in Moyed. Not all Korbanos were not. Every day bought it, yeah. And furthermore, because the truth is the Korbanos of the Yom Tovim were not really mentioned so much in Kodshim. The second thing, for example, the Korbanos of Yom Kippur Taka are in Moyed, by the way. The Korbanos of Yuma is about the Korbanos. Second of all, says the Miri, that all the Korbanos of Yom Tov were bought from Shekalim, so therefore it makes sense to put it into Moyed. The Shvira Gaon writes, a very interesting thing, that Shekalim joins Psachim. Why? Because we're going according to the calendar. Psachim, we started learning the halachos of Pesach, and Shekalim is very unique. It's not much Hashgacha Pratis. We're learning Shekalim at the very time when the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they would be busy with the Shekalim. This is the time of year, if Mashiach would be here, that would be busy collecting the Shekalim and using the Shekalim. So therefore, Shekalim comes after Psachim because it's got to do with the time of the year. The Maisa, it's a very, very precious mitzvah, Machzas HaShekel. Every single Yid had to give half a shekel to the Beis HaMikdash. And what happened was, it meant that every Yid had a small chelik in every korban. We will see. The Kohanim wanted to find an excuse not to give Machzas HaShekel. And they came up with a very powerful argument. New Kohanim, got lots of Kohanim here. How if you were a Kohen, would you get away from giving the Machzas HaShekel? Come on, you've got a lot of Kohanim.
We do work.
It's actually a rash in this week's parasha. The halacha is a korban which a kohen brings, a mincha which a kohen brings. What's the din? It never gets eaten. If the machzah shekel also was contributed by kohanim, so then the kohanim would say, if that's the case, you can't eat the lechem aponim because it's a mincha brought by kohanim. So it's very interesting. We have to look at every single korban as it belonging to every single Eid. And that's very special. It's interesting that the only korban that we do a zeicher to is machzah shekel. We do zeicher to machzah shekel on the erev Purim. Tanis Esther, we do zeicher machzah shekel because it was that very, very special mitzvah. One interesting thing is that the Gemara, what is like this? Every year we would give a machzah shekel, half a shekel. And then on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we would use the machzah shekel to start buying new korbanos. The main drasha comes from a pasuk like this: Zois oilas chodesh b'chodshoi lechodshei hashana. It's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, which for some reason the Gemara in Yerushalmi in Shekalim does not actually express fully. The Meforshim explain it, but let's get the one drasha clear. If we hear it enough times, we're able to say it in our sleep. Zois oilas chodesh b'chodshoi lechodshei hashana. Does anybody have a kash on this pasuk? Somebody must have a question.
Repetitive.
Oh, it's very repetitive. Zois, oilas, this is the common oila of chodesh b'chodshei lechodshei hashana. How many times do you need to say the word chodesh? The Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled asks the question, what's the Gemara answer? The word chodesh, besides being a month, can also mean chadesh, new. Chadesh, bringing new money, lechodshei hashana, for the new korbanos. That every year there was a mitzvah to use fresh money for the new korbanos. In fact, they never used last year's money. And we're going to have a lot of topics discussing what to do with the leftover money. So every year there was a new mitzvah on Rosh Chodesh Nisan to get fresh money to be used for the korbanos. I just want to say one final, very interesting point before we get into it. The whole of Shekalim, whenever we talk about the machzah shekel, the Mishnah always uses the word Shekalim, not machzah shekel. Shekalim. Everywhere it uses the word Shekalim. In fact, when it talks about machzah shekel, it talks about change. That's a very big problem because the Torah says machzah shekel. If you look at my chart, which I'm sure you all keep from memorizing and doing chazor on it, you'll find that what happens is like this. It's very interesting. Here, look. A shekel has 2 dinar. A seller has 4 dinar. This is a bit complicated. It's one of these confusing things. The shekel in the Torah had 4 dinar. And they changed the name of the shekel of the Torah and called it seller. And now a shekel is really a half a shekel. So if somebody would say to you, how many dinar in a shekel, what would be the real clever answer to give him?
How many dinar in a shekel?
It depends on what. Very good. Biblical shekel or Mishnah shekel. Biblical shekel, how many? 4. A Gemara shekel is 2. And that makes it very, very confusing. So for example, if I say to you shekel, you don't know, do I mean 4 dinar, 2 dinar? The Ramban in Pashas Sisa asks, he doesn't understand what in the world happened. The Torah tells us machzah shekel, give half a shekel, and suddenly come to my Shekalim, and every single line we're going to be learning shekel, shekel, shekel. Nobody ever talks about machzah shekel. What happened? Ramban says 2 different explanations. One which he says is probable, and one which says perhaps. The probable, he says, is that what happened was like this. The machzah shekel, every year, I had to give a machzah shekel. Nowadays, we only use money. In old days, barter was a very big chaylik of business. Nowadays, money is everything you use money. You're not going to a shop and barter the thing. So what happened was, machzah shekel was one of the very, very common coins. So people became used to that coin. And they didn't want to call it a machzah shekel, so they got used to calling it a shekel. Again, it's a bit like, imagine if the 50p coin would become the coin which everybody would like to use. So you would say, have you got any money on you? Have you got any shekels on you? Or any pounds, any money, any sterling on you? And you would mean the 50 pence coin. And his wife was the machzah shekel became the most common coin in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore they call that the shekel. That's one explanation of answers. Alternative answers, perhaps what they did was, they actually minted a new coin because of the fact that they didn't want to have to deal all the time with machzah shekel and shekel. But the point is, and therefore that's why they called it the shekel, because to help people with the mitzvah. I just want to point out again, the Torah says machzor shekel, the Gemara says shekel. It's not a steer at all, because what we call now a shekel, the Torah calls a shekel, we call a selah, which is for dinner. And later you'll tell me how many more and how many put and all the rest of them is going to be inside it. As I said to you, it's not like our English. It's a bit like when we said $11 million in our Potter books. They had 7 and 13 gallons and very complicated. But here it's about going a full dinner to a shekel of the Torah, but 2 dinner of the shekel. Now let's get into the Mishnah. Be'echad ba'ador, m'shchedesh ador, mashmin al shekalim. Beis would make announcements that you have to bring the shekel. I saw many of the ask question that Beis don't always take it upon themselves to make sure that everybody brings the korbanos. Why is it that suddenly Beis get involved? Why did they get involved? Everybody, you got a mitzvah, you've got a mix. So, oila, asham. Every time you bring an oila, Beis don't go around and say.
Everyone needs to be involved in the carbon. Everyone has to have a chilek in it.
But it's more than that. We will see that the Beis chased after people. They would take people's possessions away. They were sending their bailiffs. Because he says the reason is that a person never likes to pay for things which is not his. If you bring your own chatos, your own oila, your own shlam, you feel good. Therefore, Beis didn't need to chase people so much. But to send money where it made no difference, so to speak, whether you bought it or not, it wasn't your carbon, people were more reluctant. It's always. And therefore, Beis felt that they had to urge people. Many times, people are very easy to, when it's their own personal thing. When you have to get into the civil, it's hard. Okay. They would announce, please bring your shekalim. They would tell people to be careful for kilayim. In the winter, nothing grows. Right? Nothing grows in the winter. Comes the summer, things start growing. Now, there's the issa kilayim. They couldn't start telling people in the middle of winter, make sure you're going to climb. Sometimes people would have kilayim without intention. Let's say you're planting carrots. And you buy carrot seed, it is possible that pumpkin seed would get mixed in or something, or radish seed. So therefore, they would tell people now things are starting to sprout. You can see tiny little shoots. So make sure that you've got no kilayim. Now is the time to look, because now the time is ready to start to go. On the 15th of Adar, Kurnis and Megillah, read the Megillah B'Krochim in the walled cities. Anybody got a question? Yes, why did the Mishnah emphasize on the 15th? When the truth of the matter is, most people read on the 40th. It's written there, it's song, not in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was written there, it's a song. Okay. The Gemara asks the question. They would fix the ways versus rechovos. What's the difference between a derech and a rechov? Some say derech is a road, rechovos is the main high streets, like the motorways. Alternatively, rechovos were the city squares. They would fix up the roads in the city squares after a long winter, where potholes, very good, there are lots of potholes and a lot of rain, and therefore they would fix all the paths and the ways on the 15th of Adar. Why would they start fixing then? Anybody want to say, besides the fact of the winter, what do they care? Very good, for that people should come to Yerushalayim. But interestingly enough, many other Rishonim say another reason why they would fix the ways. Anybody want to suggest another reason why they fix the ways? Oi Miklot. Besides for Leveka, the one people want to run away to Oi Miklot. Ves mikvahs hamayim, all the mikvahs would get ruined in the winter from the rain. Boisin called Sochi or Rabbim, they would do all what the Rabbim would need. The Gemara discusses exactly. With sign in the kavos, they would make a sign on the kavos. They would pull a white line on a keva that people should know it's a keva, not chas shalom a kohen, or somebody wants to do tumah should go next to it. But yotzin afal kilayim, they'd go out on kilayim. Exactly, it's very briefly. On the Chodesh Adar, the shoots would be tiny. So they would tell people, make sure you've got the kilayim. By the time it came to the 15th, it's already grown 2 weeks. And then they would send out a second set of messengers, and anybody that chas v'shalom had kilayim, we will see, they would go into their fields and destroy the crops, because they had kilayim. So therefore, it was 2 separate times. One was the 1st of Adar, one was the 15th of Adar. The Gemara discusses more. So now the Gemara, why I mentioned before, the Gemara mentions, without going into the actual detail of the possible, says the Yerushalmi Gemara, why in the 1st of Adar? They should bring the shekel at the right time, and the new lishka should be, the new money of the tumas halishka should be taken at the right time, be'echad b'Nisan, and the first of Nisan. In Yerushalmi, we're going to find certain words that crop up a lot, which are very similar to the Bavli, but a bit different. The next word is good examples. V'ma. What's v'ma mean? Omar. It misses out the aleph. The Yerushalmi misses out many, many alephs. Like instead of abelozo, lozo. Instead of ovin, bon. So aleph gets missed out a very lot. It's a whole new language, the Yerushalmi. And one of the big struggles of the Yerushalmi is that the Girsos change rapidly. And therefore, today I noticed that I was looking at the article, I had one Girsa and the Gemara was using a different Girsa. Makes it a bit confusing. But at also many times we're not sure if it's a question and an answer. It's much briefer. Sometimes it could be one line a question, next line a new answer, next question a line a new topic. We'll get into it slowly but surely. So Umar means Omar. Omar Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Like the beginning. The first time, when was the Mishkan built? When was the first time? What was the date? The Mishkan, first of Nisan. The first day of Rosh Chodesh, Mishkan was set up. But on the Mishkan, so therefore, just like Rosh Chodesh Nisan of the first year, they took the Tumas Mishkan, so too every year. Rabbi Tobi of Yoshe B'Shem Kahana, he argues, and he says you can't learn from that. Why can't you learn from the first year the Mishkan was built? The Pnei Moshe says a pshat. Anybody want to suggest? Bit better, because
it had to done then.
no, the Kiryat Mitzrayim almost a whole year later. It was almost 11, 12 months. But very similar to what you're saying. It shows that was the first day the Mishkan was built. We don't know for future years when the Mishkan has already been built and going for a long time. Maybe then you can do the Tumas Lishka earlier. So he says, Nema kan chodshei, Nema lalon chodshei, 2 psukim. Here it says, Achodesh hazeh lochem, Rosh Chodoshim, Rishonu lochem, lechodshei hashana, and that's referring to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So therefore, and it says chodshei, Ma chodshei shlema lahalon, just like the chodshei which says there, Ein moedin elem Nisan is referring to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Achodesh hazeh kan, Ein moedin elem Nisan is only from Nisan. So we've got the Gzeo Shava chodshei to tell you it's Nisan. Rabbi Yonah gets upset with Rabbi Tovi. He only mentions the second half. That means all he mentions is Exer Shava of Chodshei. And that's incorrect. Dal came Kahada. Dal means to remove. It's not correct what he has said. Why? That means he says, there's a pasuk says is referring to Rosh Chodesh Nisan because it does Exer Shava Chodshei. But nowhere has he yet mentioned how we know we're even talking about Tumas Halishka. That pasuk is not talking about Tumas Halishka. That pasuk is talking about the Kol Musafim. So you need to bring another brisa to teach you that it's talking about the Tumas Halishka, and only then you can make the Gzera Shava Chodshei. The Tani Allah. We said before that from the words what do we learn from that pasuk? What do we learn from it? Said before. What do we learn from the pasuk? We said it's the Gemara on Rosh Hashanah. Chadish, renew the chidush of the new korbanos from new money. So you might have thought that chiyuv is every single month. Every single month you should do it. Chodshoy is singular. Only 1 month. You might thought any month that you want. So he said to Rabbi Tovi, you've gone and you've quoted half a brisa, and in your half of the brisa there's no raya at all that we're talking about Tumas Halishka. That means only once you know that the pasuk Chodshei v'Chodshei Hashana is coming to tell you Tumas Halishka, then you've got the word Chodshei to tell you Gzera Shava to Nisan. We know that the mitzvah is on this Nisan. Let's summarize so far. The Mishnah told us there's a mitzvah to announce in Rosh Chodesh Adar. It gives everybody how long to get the shekel to the Beis Mikdash? A month. The Gemara says, how do we know that we bring Rosh Chodesh Nisan is when the new money goes into the circle? How do you know it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan? The Gemara brings 2 sources. Either because that's how it happened the first year, or Abtovi says Chodshei Gzera Shava. The Gemara says Abtovi's Gzera Shava is lacking because it doesn't mention anything about Tumas Halishka. You need to come on to the other drasha of Chodesh b'Chodshei Hashon. Okay. Ma'u mashmin. What does the word mashmin mean? We announce. Madat Omar, just like you have said. Madat Omar comes also quite a few times. Means similar Madat Omar to what you have said. That they made an announcement that everybody should bring money to help build the Beis Hamikdash. Tamon Tanino, new topic. Tamon Tanino, we learned then Megillah in Ben Ador Rishon and Ador Sheni and Mikra Megillah Matanis of Yonim. The only difference between Ador Rishon and Ador Sheni is Mikra Megillah Matanis of Yonim. The first Ador we don't do Mikra Megillah Matanis of Yonim, only in the second Ador. Also, the announcement of the Shekalim and the Kilayim was also only in the second Ador. Let's get it clear. Somebody would say to you, when do we announce the Shekalim? By the Ador Rishon or Ador Sheni? Ador Sheni. When do you announce about Kilayim? Only by Ador Sheni. Even those who live in a walled city, if they read on the 14th, it's a good time to read it as well. So if you live in Yerushalayim and you read on the 14th, you're okay. Now, many of the Rishonim say, the Gaon included, Mishnah Silio, I mean, it's a Talmud of the Gaon, that this line of Gemara is in the wrong place. Later we're going to discuss it and then miss out this line. But either way, it doesn't make a difference because we're going to come back to it. But it's got to remember this halacha. That even those who live in Yerushalayim in the walled city, if they read on the 14th, are Yotza. Says the Gemara like this. Omar Yossi v'Yos. It is indeed correct, Yos means correct, that what? That the achroz, the announcement of the Shekalim and the announcement of the Kilayim was Rosh Chodesh Ador Sheni, not Rosh Chodesh Ador Rishon. Why? Why did they announce about the Shekalim? There'll be 60 days. There'll be 60 days from Ador Rishon till Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and that's much too long. Nuch Olawak, he said, is drum it into us and give a shiur chiduch. That people many times make the mistake that they don't want a child before something's about to happen. What's going to happen? For example, you're going to go to a shop. So before you go to the shop, you describe, we're about to go to a shop. There's going to be counters with chocolates. Well, today we're not buying any chocolates. And if you do what, you make a fuss. The next time I go to the shop, you will not be coming with. It means just before, they'll tell the child the week before or after they've had a tantrum in the shop. But 2 minutes before, they forget to do it. That means and he used to say the most important thing is to keep telling a child 2-3 minutes before when something's going to happen, what you expect from them, etc. And here the Gemara says, if you tell people that division, by the time it comes to Ador, it's just 60 days, people think to themselves, I've got a long time. And when it comes to, then they suddenly forget about it, right? If you want to do a charity campaign, you can't tell them a month in advance. You have to say it just the right time. Too early, and forget. Just those. Oh, says the Gemara. And one more thing, says the Gemara. Why do we go with Chodesh Ador that people should notice the shoots? Very, very small. Somebody came to ask me the question, and I answered it. And after I was very thrilled that Chaim Kanievsky, there's a pirush, I've got it at home. I bought it for somebody. Chaim Kanievsky pirush on Shekalim. I didn't buy it. I didn't have it on the safe of that. I bought it. He asks a question, gives the answer. But it's an obvious question and answer. He said, what happens is every so often the Sanhedrin would decide to add a second Ador. Says the Gemara, of course, the announcement of the Kilayim must be done by Ador Sheni, not by Ador Rishon. Because if it's Ador Rishon, the plants will be too small. So he asked me, he doesn't understand. The plants know that the basin are going to add the second Ador. How do the plants know that they're going to be a second Ador that they become too small? Very good. It says the answer is very good. The reason why they added Ador Sheni is because they're aware that the Torah says bring the Kol Noima when it's springtime, and if it's too early in the year because the summer year is shorter. Okay, that's not you're right. The Gemara does say that the nature changes. The Gemara about a girl less than 3, etc. But that she changes according to the cycle of the basin. But it doesn't matter. But the fact is that here it's much more simple. That basin only going to add a second Ador if they see that it's not yet spring. So if the year which is a second Ador is obviously going to be the shoots will be too small. Okay. Full stop. So full like this. So when do we announce the Shekalim? Ador Sheni. When do we announce Kilayim? Ador Sheni. Now, what about the people living far away from Eretz Yisrael? The Gemara is going to give 2 mahalchim. and machlokas. We pass like one, but I'll just tell you machlokas first, and then what we pass, and then we'll see the more inside. What about the people who live far away from Eretz Yisrael? What would you say? One mahalach is we announce it long in advance because give them more time to get it there, right? If you live in Iraq, Iran, and Babel, you need much longer. And because we want everything to be there by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, because after Rosh Chodesh Nisan we don't take any more, that's it, it's too late. We have to do Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's one mahalach. The other mahalach is not. The other mahalach is that we would announce Rosh Chodesh Adar. Some of them would get it in time for Rosh Chodesh Nisan, some would not. But we would anyway, we would do 3 times a year, they would go into this room, that a special room where they kept all the money. And 3 times a year, they would come in with the buckets and take out money. So if you didn't get your money in by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 3 times a year was 2 weeks before Pesach, 2 weeks before Shavuos, and 2 weeks before Sukkot. So if you didn't get your money in by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it didn't matter. You'll get your money in before Sukkot. According to the other man, that you had to get your money before Nisan. If your money didn't come before Nisan, it was too late. It's too bad. It was your job to get it there. Are they collecting money by Sukkot? That was for a different reason. That was only to tell people, look how nice it is. We're collecting money for the Beis Hamikdash, but not because we're getting chance for later. We passing like this more chomodik shita, that you have to get your money by Chodesh Nisan, and therefore people had to be ready before. Are they collected 3 times a year? That was only that people should know, that people would feel very good. My money is going again into the Beis Hamikdash to be used again. It was a whole special room set aside for it. So more says inside. Rabbi Chizkiah surely asked like this. According to this, from the beginning of the winter, they should bring the shekel at the right time. In order that we should take the Tuas Halishka at the right time in the first lesson. By the way, Rabbi Mono comes a very, very lot in Yerushalmi, and it doesn't ever come in Bavli. It's interesting. One time that comes. So Ula comes in both, right? So that's a common name, Rabbi Mono. But Tanina, we learned 3 times a year. We take money from the Lishka. I just want to say something as a side point. What does the word prois mean? Peace. Why does it mean a peace? Because the halacha is 30 days before Yom Tov, you're supposed to learn the halachas of Yom Tov. 2 weeks before Yom Tov, you're halfway, you're in the broken half of learning the halachas before Yom Tov. So therefore, 2 weeks before Pesach, 2 weeks before Shavuos, 2 weeks before Sukkot, you're in the peace, you're in the broken peace of Yom Tov. So they would take the Tuas Halishka 3 times a year, Prois HaPesach, Prois Shavuos, Prois Sukkot. I remember when I learned this, the Shami, I got all excited because there's a famous Shaila. This halacha that you're supposed to learn 30 days before Yom Tov, is it unique to Pesach or is it by all the Yomim Tovim? And the reason why it's a question is because Pesach is a lot of halachas to learn. But you're going to spend 30 days before Shavuos to learn the halachas, that would be a very lot of time to learn. How many halachas are there for Shavuos? Not so many halachas to learn for Shavuos. So I learned the Yerushalmi. I thought to myself, from this Yerushalmi, if you look in the Korban Eidah, if you got the Korban Eidah, it's by me, it's 5 lines from the bottom. First of Pesach, Hadu Tesvav Yom, to first Hashem Mechzu, Veshleishim Kedem Achag, Shalim V'Doshim. 30 days before Yom Tov, you have to learn the halachas. So I thought, Prois means that you have to, half is a piece. Is a raya from this Yerushalmi that you're supposed to learn even by Shavuos, because it says, Prois HaPesach, Prois HaTzeres, Prois HaChag. Is a raya 30 days before Shavuos. And I was so excited myself, I thought, wow, that must be really good. I found a raya that 30 days before Shavuos you have to learn. I opened up a Mishnah Bro, the Sharatzin and Simon Tovchov test writes, there are those who declare, do you need to learn 30 days before Shavuos? As the Sharatzin Mishnah Bro, there's a raya from the Yerushalmi in Shekalim that you do have to. Now, okay, imagine the Chafetz Chaim. It's one thing when you're learning the Shekalim to study. Everybody can now, in the middle of learning the Gemara, can think of the proof. But when you're busy learning Hilchas Pesach and Pesach Shavuos, to remember the Yerushalmi, the kindness of the Chafetz Chaim is unbelievable. To think about it, he's not learning Shekalim at the time. He was learning Hilchas Pesach Shavuos. Do you need to learn 30 days before Shavuos? Answer, yes, it's Yerushalmi and Shekalim that you need to. Okay. No, but you don't need to now, because it's Yerushalmi. Once you've got the Yerushalmi. That's right. But Maisa we've learned, went off the point a little bit, but it's a valid point, that the halacha is we would take from that room 3 times a year. Poisa Pesach, Poisa Atzeres, Poisa Chag. 2 weeks before Pesach, 2 weeks before Shavuot, 2 weeks before Sukkot. 2 weeks long, accurate. 15 days before Pesach, 15 days before Shavuot, 15 days before Sukkot. So Lemaisa we see, Omale Lo Neima Inein Dekrevi Bepoisa Pesach. That the ones nearby came with Pesach. Those who were close before Pesach came Pesach. Those that were far away, those that were even further before Chag. So the Gemara says, why did you say you need to announce the beginning of the winter? You don't need to announce the beginning of the winter. When should you announce? Listen. Oh, people won't get it in time for Chodesh Nisan. What's the answer? So no, you should announce it for Chodesh Hador. In time, the people get it for Chodesh Nisan. Oh, people won't get it in time for Chodesh Nisan. What's the answer? Doesn't matter. When would they get it in for? Shavuot Sukkot. Amalei, no. Top of Beis, on Beis. Kulo ka'achasibo. All of it was brought only on Chodesh Nisan, and there's no such thing as taking to Masalishka for later. In order to make people to make a pumbi is to make it a public affair. So therefore, you have to get it in by this. The truth of the matter is, the Gemara discusses it more later. But this is a machlokes as to why they did it 3 times. What's the 2 shittas why they did it 3 times? Either to get the later ones or just to be able to make people be aware. Okay. Very good. Says the Gemara. Now we have a bit of a Gadata the Yerushalmi. We're up to the second line, a new topic. If you do a pass b'shem Rabbi, hey nikro v'lo nivas, can we read such a pasuk without being scared? The Tova, when it comes to good things, to build the Mishkan, it says, Kol nediv leiv. Only those that were generous gave money. When it came to the Egel, Vaispoku Kol everybody. When it came to the Egel, everybody. When it came to the Mishkan, it just says nediv leiv. So you see, that's something which makes you shudder, makes you scared. That for bad things, everybody gives money. Good things, it is. The famous story about this Gemara, there was somebody who had collected for something, and he saw that he was doing very, very well. So the Visco told his Gaboim to check out the story, what's he collecting for, and they found he was collecting taka for the scholar movement. And he said, I asked him, how did you know it was a Ruach Kodesh? That when I see people giving so easily, must be Yisroel. Another example like this, La Tova, when it comes to good things to the Har Sinai, he had to encourage them to go to Har Sinai. Levov the Meraglim, you all came rushing. So when you come rushing, is very for bad. That's the famous film of Gonis inside. By Rus, that she was struggling, that Rus was struggling to go. When you see when it's an effort, so it's more difficult. Another example, Le Tova, was for good things. As Yoshim Moshe of the Yisroel, only Moshe and Kali sang. Kali is like a higher level. Levo, Batisa Koloido, everybody cried by the Meraglim. Another example. When they came to the Egel, they got up early by Shkimu Baboika. That they would get up early to do Averos. To do mitzvahs, they never got up early. But to do Averos, Kali get up early. It's impossible to understand the nature of this nation. It's when the Egel, they asked for money for the Egel, when they gave it. It's when the Mishkan, they asked money for the Mishkan, when and they gave. The fact that Kaisel gave for the Egel and they gave for the Mishkan makes it very confusing to understand where Kaisel are really coming from. This Masnita, he said, Bosisa Kapiras Zav Toy. Kapiras, the word Kapor. Yovoy Zav Shal Kapiras, the gold of the Kapiras should come. Bechape Zav Shal Egel, and atone for the gold of the Egel. That's the end of the Haggadah. The Gemara brings a few examples of Klal Yisrael, so to speak, being more keen to do bad things than good things. And the Kapiras was Bechape, the money they spent on the Kapiras was Bechape for the gold of the Egel. New thing. The Gemara Nas is a very straightforward thing. We'll go through very briefly outside. It's like this. In Parshas Truma, and interestingly enough, it's also in Parshas Kisis, the Gemara says in a minute, the Torah uses the word Truma 3 times. And those that learn Chumash Rashi will straight away tell us, what does the Torah? Yes, you should know it. What were the 3 Trumas? No. Again, when they built the Mishkan, there was 3 Trumas. 1, gold, copper, which everybody gave as much as they wanted. Some gave more, some gave less. And what did they use it for? The building of the Mishkan. A second truma was a machzah shekel, which they used for the korbanos, which we do every single year. The third one was like this. Everybody gave a machzah shekel, and the machzah shekel was used for the adonim. How many adonim were there? There was 100 adonim. If you work it out, there were 48 kvoshim. Each keresh had 2 adonims, 96. Now, the front, they had 4 for the poichas. So that is 100 adonim. Each adon was made out of 3,000 shekels. So it comes out, it was 300,000 shekels, which is exactly 600,000 half shekels. So everybody gave a machzis shekel of the males, and then made, we'll see later about women and children. Again, I said one was gold, copper, and things everybody gave as much as they wanted. One was machzis shekel for the korbanos, and one was machzis shekel for the adonim. The Torah says the word truma 3 times, Pad Kisisa, and in Parshas Truma, to be meramis for these 3 trumas. And in fact, we will see that the Gemara now tells us some of the differences between the 3 of them. Very simple. 3 times it says Parshas Zois the Tumas Adonim, the Tumas Shekalim, the Tumas Mishkan. It says 3 the Parshas Zois. Sorry, Shalish was never Parshas Zois. Tumas Adonim, the Tumas Shekalim, the Tumas Mishkan. And Taber of the Isavi Chuli Tumah of the Grimers, the Tumas Adonim. That's referring to the Adonim. Meis Kodesh Hashed Venuli Boit Kichos Tumosi, the Tumas Shekalim. Was this Tumas Shetichumi Tom the Tumas Mishkan? Tumas Mishkan went to the Mishkan for the Mishkan. Mashir Tsuyas, so they could do it whatever they wanted. If the B'tzalel wanted to use some of the gold for the Choshen, you could use it for the Choshen. If you want to use it for the Horn, you could use it for the Horn. Tumas Shekalim leKolban. Mashir Yasu, the basin could do whatever they want, which Kolban for which. Everybody had to give the same amount in order they should be equal. That means everybody gave a machzah shekel. That what happened was, again, the wealthier person didn't give more and the poor person didn't give less, and everybody gave a machzah shekel for the Tumas Adonim. And it says, even by the Pasha of Kisisa, Nema Bo Sholish Trumos, machzah shekel Tumah Hashem, eaten Tumas Hashem, losses Tumas Hashem. That 3 times it says the word Tumah, Tumah, the 3 different Tumas. Rashi there says that by 2 of them it says Lechapa Nafshu Seichem, by 1 it doesn't, because the korbanos and the mishkan was Lechapa, the Adonim wasn't. So therefore each Tumah represents a different avodas. There were 3 different Tumas. Okay. The Rishonim, some of the Rishonim point out like this. A complicated point is that the Gemara does not use the lashon or oshin lo yarba v'adal lo yamid regarding the tumas of the shekalim. It only says it regarding the tumas adonim. There's a big machlokes Rishonim that what happens if Klal Yisrael are small in number and the price of korbanos shoots up. It's a very interesting machlokes if you think about it. Let's say Klal Yisrael fall in numbers. There's only 50,000 either. And it get very expensive, and the machzah shekel won't cover it. Machlokes Rishonim what to do about it. The Rambam says that what you should do, this Sanhedrin would do is they would make everybody pay more, and that way everybody had equal share. The Ravid says everybody gave machzah shekel, and some people would donate extra. We'll come to it maybe later. The point is like this: the Rambam says the ikin nekuda was that it was equal share. It didn't have to be a machzah shekel. Machzah shekel was the minimum. That's right. Sometimes taxes would have to go up. Okay, we'll come to it. Oh, lo yamit machzah shekel, but it says it is in relative to each other. A wealthier person must give more than a poorer person. What? Oh, so he says that everybody had to, according to the Bible, everybody had to give machzah shekel, no more, no less, and then after that you could give more. We'll see. The 15th would read the Megillah in the walled cities. How can you say the Mishnah? How can the Mishnah tell us on the 15th we read the Megillah? We know that everybody is on the 14th. So why does the Mishnah say on the 15th? Meaning like this. Where the Takman Chaditin explains. The Mishnah says 2 things about the 15th, a few things about the 15th. They would read the Megillah, they would fix the ways, they would fix the mikvahs, they would make the signs on the kvahs. The Mishnah is telling us that all these things happened in Adol Sheni. And since they all began on the 15th, therefore, the Mishnah is much more keen to tell us the halachas that everything happens in the second Adar, not the first Adar. Since they all happened on the 15th, so we mentioned, by the way, Megillah is also on the 15th. But if we were coming to tell us Halachas Purim, you're right, it would say the 14th, because the 14th, after all, is the day when most people read. But we're interested in all the other things that the Sanhedrin would do, which was to fix the ways and everything, and they did that only on the 15th. And the only reason we mention Megillah, by the way, is to mention that it would be done on the second Adar, not the first Adar. Just point out like this, the Rashash points this out. It comes out an interesting thing, by the way. People discuss, are you allowed to work on Purim? Would you be able to bring a raya, yes or not? Because you are allowed to work. Because according to this Malach of the Gemara is saying like this. Really, Mishnah is coming to tell us all the jobs they did on the 15th. And that which was the 15th? The 15th of the second Adar, the time when they would read the Megillah. So you can read, you see that even those in the walled cities are allowed to read the Megillah. Nevertheless, they're allowed to work. They would. But the fact that they established it as a day when everybody would start the jobs of fixing the ways, you must remember they would employ people, is a right that there's no Issa Malacha.
The Mishnah was saying that all the non-walled cities do the fixing.
No, that's not what the Gemara explains it. The Gemara is explaining Faked that the walled cities where they read the Megillah on the second Adar, that's what they started with. Okay. Rabbi Yosef Abacha v'Yosvin, Rabbi Yosef Abacha was sitting. Rabbi Yosef Abacha. V'mistabel l'shovav le'boiloi. Mistama is also for the haba. Meaning like this. Let's get very clear. I'll ask you a question. Rabbi Chia told us that if somebody reads the Megillah on the 14th and he lives in a walled city, he does not have, he's Yotza. He's Yotza. This person that came to ask the question for Rabbi Chia, and he said to him that even if you will live in a walled city, you're Yotza if you read on the 14th. When did he come to ask Rabbi Chia the question? Did he ask him the question before the 15th and he still had time to read on the 15th? Or was it already long after the 15th? When would you say? What would you say? Logically. Logic.
After the 15th.
It was after the 15th.
Or you could have still read it on the 15th.
The world says the exact opposite, I'm afraid. And I'll explain to you why. If it's after the 15th, what's he asking? What's he asking? Let's say it's the 20th of Adar. And he says, it comes to B'chia, I read on the 14th. Am I Yotza? So what you're asking, what do you mean by Yotza? There's nothing you can do about it. No, next day you have to read on the 15th because it's a walled city.
Same way as after Shabbos, you go after Shabbos. I did this on Shabbos.
What's the point? There's no point in asking the question.
You say you could have asked that to Shekalim. What are you saying?
No. The Gemara says, they all explain, everybody explains this. Now, of course, we're talking about the Haba. We're talking about somebody's 14th afternoon. And he comes to Rabbi Chia and he says to him, I read today and I live in a walled city. Do I need to read tomorrow? Rabbi Chia said to him, not. Because if Rabbi Chia was telling him that you don't need to read after the 15th, what's Rabbi Chia teaching him? There's nothing to teach him. What should Rabbi Chia say? To read again? It's too late. Elamai, Rabbi Chia was telling him that once it's 15th, you don't need to. Once it's you read on the 14th. Faith the Gemara. That doesn't start true. Because there were certain cities that we weren't sure if you read on the 14th and the 15th. And what's our halacha? You read on both. Now, what in the world would it then be to read on both? If it's the 14th, you read on the 14th, it's okay. If it's the 15th, you read on the 14th, it's okay. Bishlebe, if you say like you all of you wanted to say that B'chia only meant afterwards, fine. But since the Gemara says that obviously cannot be, because it doesn't make any sense to paskin once l'achar ma'isa, what is there to paskin? So the only psak can be before. So what's B'chia? So more answers, it makes a difference between a city, where the question is, when should we establish the time to read it? And if we tell everybody to read on the 14th, they will never know that there was a mitzvah for them, that maybe they won't sit in this mitzvah on the 15th, we tell them to read twice. But the individual that by mistake does it on one, he's okay. But the Gemara never goes back to what you were saying, I'm afraid, that B'chia was saying after the 15th, because that won't make any sense. Let's read it inside. Oh. Votani, Mokish Naguli Kesa Shneyomim, Kesa Shneyomim, Omalei, Ofanosova, can also hold like you guys la bomb of Monovios. Even with Shekalim Yudalet, if you would say to people that you don't need to read again on the 15th, you're going to destroy the time of reading on the 15th because people won't even know there's a mitzvah to read on the 15th. Let's carry on. All the mitzvahs that apply in the second Adar do not apply in the first Adar. except for Hesped and Tanis, which we don't have a Hesped and Tanis on the first Ador. Rabbi Bo, Rabbi Yomi, B'Shem Simon, B'Shem Shomon Levi, Aloch B'Shem Gamliel, that what? That we don't have a Hesped or a Tanis on the first Ador. Avuna Rabba, the Tzipon on my Hinig of Chia B'Tzipoyon Kechodot of Shgamliel. Le'Rabba Alei Hinig, Aval Alocha Loi. He only said that Minig is like Shgamliel, but not the Alocha. Our Indian story is case in Ador Rishon Ador Sheni Stam. When it comes to Ador Rishon, you write Ador Sheni. Comes to Ador Sheni, you write Stam. If you do Ador Rishon Stam, Ador Sheni Tanyon, you write second. It's Machlokes Tanoim how to do it. And it's a very, very important halacha legavish gittin. You have to know how to call each month Nissan with a yod, without a yod. Ador Rishon, Ador Sheni. We pass it. You write Ador Rishon, and then when it comes to Ador Sheni, we write Ador Sheni, because we're back with for both. But the Ma'aseh, the Ikka Alocha is you write for Ador Sheni, Ador Stam. Ma'aseh, so that's Machlokes. However, Machlokes is the Alocha like Rishon Gamliel, or is the Minig like Rishon Gamliel, not to do a Hesped or a Tanis in the first Ador. We're up to the top line on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Mazel Tov, and starting a new Masechta. Yerushalmi.
How come
The third of the way.
How come they put Yerushalmi in the back? Is this the only Masechta?
It's not the only one. It's the end of the thing, Midas. Tommy, but
That's why I come to this morning.
Kedim is only Mishnais.
Yeah.
It's an old thing that the Shekalim was part of the. Mazel Tov, Ian, Mazel Tov, Yehuda.